The meeting itself is where everything starts. King Charles is presiding over a formal discussion about the transfer of the Kent family estates and patronages. On the surface, that sounds administrative, routine even, but nothing about the configuration of that room is routine. You have the king at the head of it all, caught between his obligations to the crown and the fractures running through his own family. Camilla is seated right beside him, a woman who spent the better part of 3 decades enduring public hostility to finally reach the position she now holds. And that history matters, because it explains everything about how she carries herself in rooms like this one. She is always measuring, always aware of how she is perceived, always defending ground she feels she had to fight for. Across from them is Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, a man who has served the royal family with quiet consistency for decades and who, at this moment, is still carrying the weight of losing his wife not even a year ago. And then there is Catherine, Princess of Wales, composed, present, and representing something that no title alone can manufacture: genuine public trust. Everyone in that room understands what she means to the future of the monarchy. That understanding is sitting in the air before a single word is spoken. Now watch this, because the moment Prince Edward opens his mouth, the temperature in the room changes immediately. He clears his throat and announces that the vast majority of the Kent family patronages are being transferred. Then he turns toward Catherine and states clearly that she will be the one to receive them. And Catherine does exactly what you would expect from her. She bows her head. She accepts the responsibility with quiet reverence. No performance, no visible satisfaction, just a graceful acknowledgement of the weight being placed on her shoulders. That composure, that very stillness, is precisely what starts to unravel Camilla. Her gaze locks, her fingers press against the fabric of her skirt, and something shifts behind her eyes. Now, here is where it is worth pausing, not to excuse what comes next, but to actually understand it. Because what Camilla is experiencing in this moment is not simply jealousy over charities changing hands. To her, every significant responsibility handed to Catherine is another piece of evidence that her own decades of work are being quietly written out of the institution's future. She holds the highest formal rank among the royal women. She is the queen. And yet the current of influence in that room is flowing directly past her and settling at the feet of her daughter-in-law. The report describes it as envy colliding with the fear of being erased by the generation coming up behind her. And whether you sympathize with her position or not, you can see how that collision would begin to corrode someone's restraint. She looks toward Charles. She needs him to say something, anything, to slow this down or acknowledge her standing. And she gets nothing. Complete silence from the king. Because Charles already knew this was coming. He had already given his approval before the meeting began. That silence is not passive. That silence is a decision, and Camilla feels every second of it. Okay, stay with me, because this is where the room shifts from tense to something else entirely. Camilla stands up, mid-proceedings. Her chair scrapes backward, and the sound cuts through the room like something breaking. Every person in that space goes completely still. Couriers are stunned. Charles looks visibly troubled, and Camilla is standing at her full height, face pale, eyes lit with something that is well past frustration. The report describes her physical state in detail that is hard to ignore. Her breathing is shallow and rapid, her lips are trembling and she is working to control it. Her eyes are glassy with pressure she can no longer contain. This is not a calculated political move. This is a person who feels publicly cornered and is responding from that place rather than from discipline. She directs her words straight at Prince Edward. No vulgarity, but the report says every sentence lands like something sharpened specifically for this room. She challenges the concept of fairness directly. She lists her service. She names her contributions. She demands to know why a family legacy of this magnitude is being taken from someone of her standing and handed to someone with significantly fewer years in the role. Her gaze moves around the room deliberately, as if she is demanding that each person sitting there acknowledge what she sees as a clear injustice. And look, the argument she is making is not completely without logic. She is saying that she has done the work, absorbed the scrutiny, made the sacrifices, and earned her position through years of persistence. Whether the room agrees with that framing is another matter entirely. But that is what she believes in that moment with complete conviction. Now watch what Prince Edward does, because his response is the exact opposite of everything she just delivered. He does not raise his voice. He does not shift in his seat. He sits like someone who came into that room already knowing exactly how it was going to end. His hands are clasped on the table. His face holds no readable emotion. When Camilla finally stops speaking, he raises his head slowly and meets her eyes with a steadiness that is more disarming than any raised voice could be. His response is simple, and it cuts straight through everything she said. He is not in that room to distribute influence or determine who deserves what political standing. He is there to carry out the final wishes of his late wife. That is the entirety of his position, and he is not moving from it. The contrast between the two of them in that moment is stark enough that nobody in the room attempts to intervene. Charles grips his fountain pen. His jaw is tight. He is caught between loyalty to the woman sitting beside him and respect for the cousin sitting across from him. That is not a comfortable place for any man to be, let alone a king presiding over a formal proceeding that is supposed to represent the orderly continuation of royal tradition. But Edward is not finished, and what he says next removes any remaining ground Camilla was standing on. He brings up the funeral of the Duchess of Kent. Camilla was absent. When the Duchess's health declined suddenly, Camilla cited it as her reason for not attending. The Kent family mourned without the Queen present. That is the fact Edward places on the table, quietly and with precision, in front of every person in that room. And then he shifts his gaze to Catherine. He points out that while the Queen chose to be absent, it was Catherine who stepped in, Catherine who led the procession, Catherine who fulfilled the ceremonial responsibilities, Catherine who stayed with the grieving family and offered genuine comfort through every part of that day. Not because she was required to, because she chose to. So, let that sit for a second. This is no longer a conversation about titles or seniority or decades of accumulated rank. Edward has reduced it to something far more straightforward. One woman showed up when the family needed presence. The other did not, and now, a year later, that choice is being remembered in the most formal setting possible, with the most significant witnesses in the country sitting in the room. Camilla's face, which had been flushed and animated with argument, goes pale. Her lips part, but nothing follows. She has built her challenge on the foundation of her contributions, and Edward has just pointed out a specific moment when those contributions were nowhere to be found, and someone else filled the space she left empty. But even that is not where Edward stops. He goes further. He describes the final days of the Duchess of Kent with the kind of detail that only someone who was there would know. He speaks about how she was anxious, even as her health was failing, about the future of the organizations and causes she had spent her life building, the charities, the arts institutions, the veterans she had supported for years, and he describes how, in those final days, with full clarity of mind, she named Catherine as the person she trusted to carry that work forward. Now, to anyone listening to that testimony, the sincerity is unmistakable. A woman at the end of her life thinking not about herself but about the people and causes she was leaving behind. That is not a political maneuver. That is a human being making a decision about what matters most. But Camilla's mind is no longer processing this rationally. The combination of humiliation, surprise, and what she perceives as coordinated exclusion has pushed her into a place where sincerity and conspiracy look identical. She becomes convinced, completely convinced, that the Kent family and Catherine worked together, that the dying wish is a constructed narrative, that the entire proceeding has been engineered specifically to diminish her standing in front of the most powerful people in the institution. Her hands grip the edge of the table. She shakes her head in short, repeated movements. Her eyes move to Catherine with an intensity that is no longer just frustration. She is looking at her daughter-in-law as though Catherine is the architect of everything she is experiencing in that room. And Catherine sits perfectly still through all of it. She does not respond to the look. She does not shift or react. She simply remains exactly where she has been since the meeting began, composed, present, and apparently unbothered by the storm building across the table from her. Then Prince Edward reaches into his jacket. He produces an envelope. The paper is aged, parchment that has clearly been preserved with deliberate care. He places it on the table in front of the room, and the weight of what it represents settles over everyone watching before he even opens it. Inside is a handwritten letter. The signature belongs to the late Duchess of Kent. The wax seal is official and intact. The handwriting is careful but carries the slight unevenness of someone writing through serious illness. Every line documents what the Duchess wanted. Every line names Catherine. Every line is dated and sealed in a way that leaves no room for interpretation or challenge. When Charles sees the handwriting, something visibly moves through him. The room lets out a collective, quiet acknowledgement. There is no more discussion to be had about intent or authenticity. The letter is the final word, written by the hand of the woman at the center of all of it, and it says exactly what Edward said it would say. Camilla looks at it, and something inside her gives way entirely. The composure she built over decades of public life, the discipline she maintained through years of relentless criticism and scrutiny, does not hold. Her breath comes in short, uneven waves. Her face contorts. The tears that follow are not soft or sorrowful. They are the release of someone who came into that room with weapons and is leaving without a single one of them intact. She is not grieving. She is furious and humiliated and completely exposed. And then, still in the middle of that chamber, with every senior royal figure in attendance, she turns on both Charles and Edward. Her voice is hoarse but loud enough that there is no question about what she is saying. She calls the decision a betrayal. She accuses both men of conspiring against her. She claims they are working together to push her toward irrelevance inside the very institution she gave her life to join. That is the moment the decision is made to have her removed from the room, and that is where this part of the story ends, because what happens after she leaves, what is said in that chamber once the door closes behind her, and what this means for her position going forward, that is an entirely different chapter. If this story is landing the way it should, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps Prime Royal Central bring you coverage like this. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it before the next part drops, because what comes out of that palace after Camilla is escorted out is the part of this story that nobody is talking about yet. You do not want to be catching up on this one. Stay with Prime Royal Central. This is not over. Camilla was standing in the middle of that council chamber, voice raised, accusations flying, and every senior royal figure in that room watching it happen in real time. Now here is where it goes from dramatic to something that genuinely has no modern precedent inside those walls. Because what Charles does next changes everything. He raises his hand, not once, but several times, gesturing for her to stop. His expression carries both authority and something closer to pain. He is trying to remind her, without saying it directly, that there is a standard expected of the person holding her title, a standard she is currently dismantling in front of the people whose respect she needs most. Camilla does not stop. She moves toward the conference table, her fingers reaching for the documents as if sheer physical contact with them could reverse what has already been decided. Her voice climbs higher. The room, which was already holding its collective breath, goes rigid. Couriers sit frozen, eyes moving between the king and the woman beside him, with no framework for what they are witnessing, because nothing like this has happened in this chamber in living memory. And Charles, who has absorbed every second of this with visible restraint, finally reaches the point where restraint is no longer an option. He closes his eyes. He draws one long, measured breath, and then he turns and nods toward the head guard stationed at the oak doors. Now watch this moment, because it is the one that defines everything that follows. Two royal guards in full formal attire step into the chamber. Their boots strike the stone floor with a sound that is cold and deliberate, and every person in that room hears it. They move toward Camilla and position themselves to escort her out. Not aggressively, but with a firmness that makes the intention absolutely clear. She tries to pull away. Her eyes are still fixed on the table, on the documents, on everything she came into that room determined to stop. But the moment has already passed, and no amount of resistance changes the outcome. The reigning Queen Consort of England is walked out of a formal royal council meeting on the direct orders of her husband, the king. The heavy door closes behind her, and the sound it makes, that single definitive click, is the sound of a chapter ending. The silence that follows is the kind that sits in a room like weight. Nobody speaks. Nobody moves quickly. Because what just happened is not a domestic disagreement or a moment of tension that can be smoothed over with a carefully worded statement. This is a fracture, visible and undeniable, in the center of the monarchy's most private and protected space. And everyone sitting in that chamber just witnessed it firsthand. Whatever you think of Camilla's position, whatever understanding you have for the pressures she carries, being removed from a council meeting by palace guards at the instruction of the king is not something that quietly disappears from the institutional memory of a place like Buckingham Palace. That moment has weight, it has consequence, and those consequences are already beginning to move. Okay, stay with me, because the story does not pause to process what just happened. Charles is still the monarch. The business of the crown does not wait for emotional recalibration. He sits in the sovereign chair, his face carrying the kind of exhaustion that goes deeper than a single difficult afternoon. But he straightens. He breathes. He signals to the royal secretary. An official document is placed before him, formal, sealed, representing the transfer that this entire meeting was convened to finalize. Charles picks up his pen and signs it. From that signature forward, Catherine is the official custodian, manager, and directing patron of the entire network the Kent family built across decades. The charitable foundations, the veterans organizations, the arts development programs, the community initiatives. All of it now falls under her stewardship, backed by a signed royal document and the dying wishes of the woman who built much of it from the ground up. Camilla's outburst altered nothing. The decision Charles made before he walked into that room was the decision he walked out with. And that fact, perhaps more than anything else that happened in that chamber, is the one that will follow her. Across the palace, in a different wing entirely, Camilla is now alone. The report places her in her bedchamber, and the description of that space in that moment is telling. The resistance she brought into the council chamber with such force produced exactly one result: the dismantling of the last remaining dignity she had carefully maintained through years of public scrutiny. She understands that now. The fury that drove her out of her seat, the accusations she launched at Charles and Edward, the attempt to physically reach those documents, none of it changed a single line of what was signed. The institution moved forward and left her behind in that room, and it did not look back. What settles over her is not grief. It is something harder and quieter than that. A suffocating helplessness that sits on top of a pride that has nowhere left to go. She watches, from the distance of that isolated room, as the weight and momentum of the crown shifts, not dramatically, not with announcement, but with the steady, indifferent motion of an institution that has always known how to continue, regardless of who objects. But back in the council chamber, something else is happening, and it is the kind of moment that cuts through the weight of everything that preceded it. Prince Edward rises from his seat. In his hands is a small box covered in deep blue velvet, marked by age and handled with the kind of care reserved for things that cannot be replaced. He lifts the lid. Inside is a brooch, sapphire and diamond, the deep blue stone at its center, catching the light in a way that holds the room's attention immediately. This piece belonged to the late Duchess of Kent. It was not placed in that box by chance or ceremony. It was put there with intention, as a physical transfer of something that goes beyond legal documentation or formal title. Edward steps toward Catherine. His eyes hold none of the tension from earlier in the afternoon. What is there instead is something steadier, the expression of a man fulfilling the last meaningful thing his late wife asked of him. He extends the box. Catherine raises both hands and receives it with a stillness that says more than words would. She looks at the brooch without speaking. Then she gently presses the box against her chest, and the gesture carries in it the full understanding of what she is being asked to carry. Not just the patronages, not just the title of custodian, but the values, the compassion, and the decades of quiet, dedicated work the Duchess gave to the people and causes she believed in. If you are watching Prime Royal Central for the first time right now, hit subscribe and like this video, because this is the kind of coverage we bring you consistently, and this story still has significant ground left to cover. Catherine does not linger in the ceremony of that moment. She walks out of the council chamber with the sapphire brooch on her lapel and immediately begins working. Her team meets with representatives from veterans organizations. Blueprints for the patronages are reviewed. Arts institutions receive direct communication. Every engagement she takes on in the days that follow is deliberate and visible, grounded in the same instinct that Edward pointed to when he spoke about the funeral. The instinct to simply show up, do the work, and let the substance speak for itself. The public and media response is immediate and significant. Charitable organizations that the Kent family built over generations begin publishing formal statements of welcome for their new patron. Catherine's image fills front pages, not because of a manufactured moment, but because the organizations she is now serving are publicly endorsing the transition with genuine warmth. The institutions are speaking, the people connected to those institutions are speaking, and what they are saying collectively is that this succession feels right, and that matters more than any signed document, because public trust is the one thing the Crown cannot legislate into existence. Catherine has not simply inherited a network of responsibilities, she has inherited the genuine regard of the people those responsibilities were built to serve. That kind of endorsement is not transferable by decree, it has to be earned, and the evidence suggests she had already been earning it long before this meeting took place. So, contrast that with what is happening on the other side of the palace. Camilla has withdrawn entirely, no public engagements, no statements. She has cited convalescence as the reason for her absence, which gives the situation a surface-level explanation that most people will accept without question. But inside that bedchamber, according to the report, something is changing in her that goes beyond the anger she brought into that council room. The explosive fury she could not contain in front of Charles, Edward, and the assembled court has cooled. And what it has cooled into is more considered and more dangerous than what it replaced. She sits by the window, looking out at the empty palace courtyard, and the expression on her face is no longer one of raw, uncontrolled emotion. It is something quieter and more focused. The report describes it as a hardening, resentment solidifying into something with edges. Her hands grip the armrests of her chair with a controlled pressure that tells you the energy has not dissipated, it has simply found a different form. She is watching the newspapers. She is watching the coverage of Catherine. She is watching the public response build with each passing day. And every image, every headline, every statement from a charitable organization welcoming the Princess of Wales as their new patron lands with the precision of something aimed directly at the part of her that is already wounded. She is not finished. That much is clear from the report. The defeat in the council chamber has not extinguished her ambition. It has given it a sharper direction and a colder temperature. Whatever comes next from Camilla will not look like what happened in that room. It will be quieter than that, more deliberate, and potentially more consequential for everyone involved. So when you step back from all of it and look at the full picture, here is what this story actually is. Prince Edward carried out his late wife's dying wishes, and in doing so, he handed Catherine not just a collection of patronages, but a public validation that no title alone could have provided. Camilla arrived in that meeting prepared to challenge it and left the meeting escorted by palace guards, having surrendered the last of her composure in a room full of the people whose respect she most needed to keep. Charles signed the transfer regardless. The institutions embraced Catherine immediately, and Camilla retreated to silence, not the silence of someone who has accepted a loss, but the silence of someone who is deciding what to do next. The public chapter of this confrontation appears to be closed, but the private one, the one being written right now in a darkened room in a palace where power is always moving and never fully settled, that chapter is still being composed. And if this report is accurate in its reading of where Camilla is right now, the next move in this story will not announce itself until it is already in motion. Prime Royal Central will be tracking every development as it surfaces. If you are not subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button and turn on notifications so you are not starting from behind when the next part of this breaks. Like this video if it gave you the full picture, because that genuinely helps us keep bringing you this level of detail and coverage.